Well, good afternoon. Can you hear me? Good. It's really an honor to come and talk to you about my world of quilt making because when I quilt, whenever I make whatever quilt I'm making, I'm always thinking about my grandparents, the line of farmers that I came from, because that was my introduction to quilt making. Because the house where I was born and I grew up was, of course, it did not have any heat and hot water, and at that time we had no electricity, so the quilts were a major part of staying warm. The women in my family quilted, not with any patterns, but they used old clothing that were no longer wearable, like so many other people. They would cut a strip or a square or whatever. And surprisingly, they made the most beautiful, beautiful quilts. And when you got in bed at night, it was like you got in bed with the whole family. And if you were a child and cold, of course, that was some sort of warmth. That was love. So most of my work, I would say, has the roots in that period. And also my grandfather, who was an excellent storyteller, and he didn't know that he was telling stories. He would just say, "Remember that time," and then he would give us this long story when he was growing up. And between that and the sewing, I just fused it and made story quilts. That's the basis of my story quilts, and I would like to now introduce you to one of them at the very end. That's my grandmother and my sister, and my grandmother is giving my sister a lesson on how they lived when she was growing up, when she was a child. And I think grandmothers can do no wrong, so when they tell you something, that's what you believe. So that's Annie Brown Tyler, and that's my sister, Mildred Peggie. And next to that, my grandfather, William Tyler, Sr. He was a great storyteller, and he just could pull stories out of the air. And he used to always tell us that if you want to see how far wild horses were, put your ear to the ground, which is an old Cherokee or Indian saying about put your ear to the ground, for the same reason. So in the background, you see the wild horses, and he's standing there amongst sunflowers that grew along the kitchen of our house. And in the far back, I like to use always those trees to reflect distance, because the farm was large, and so the trees were always on the square lines of the farm. And the blue in between that just represents the farm where we lived. I work with children with disabilities, and I find them to be the most creative because they do not need to overthink. If you tell them a story, or if you tell them an idea that they're going to work on, they immediately know what to do because they create from here and not up here, which is good. And I've learned so much from them. And so this is something that we made. Third grade made this for this class, and then I did one also with the children with disabilities. And in here you see the children with many disabilities. And sometimes when I'm working at night and I can't get a story right, there's a certain type of disability in that too, because I can't move forward. I can't get out of my own way of thinking about color and what should be, and sometimes I just need to let go and let the design take care of itself, and many times it works. So with these children, they're at the museum, or coming from the museum, and you see one that is looking up, one that is in a wheelchair, and I usually say to the children when I show this, can you find the student that's in a wheelchair? And of course, it's the one in the middle who's reading Amelia Earhart, because this child is disabled. So he will read about someone who has flight, someone who can move around. And I find that true with most kids. If I'm working in disabilities, they pick the opposite of what they are because they don't have a disability to themselves. We have the disability if we don't see it. They're fine with it. So the child in the middle has the Amelia Earhart book in a wheelchair, and then there's one child that's visually impaired. He has the glasses on, and the other two, and this one that's sitting here with a Ronald McDonald t-shirt. Because no matter what you are in that class, when you say Ronald McDonald's for lunch, they all know what that is. So they're very, very, very visual. And again, I've learned how to see, how to hear, and how to speak when I'm talking to them. With children, I would say, third or fourth grade, they're so energetic. If you give them an idea, before you could get back to your seat, they say, okay, I'm finished. What? They're finished with it. And they might have 10 pieces on this little block because they don't overthink things. And I tend to look at it and audition this and audition that color, audition that shape. By the time I finish, the whole design is not what it was in the beginning. But they don't. They see, they go like this, okay, next. So that's my beloved children. And I can't tell you how much they have taught me how to do all of these things. So anyway, at some point in my life, I decided that I would take some dance classes, and that taught me how to bring movement into my work. So I studied with a woman who taught folk art dancing from Haiti, and I learned all of those traditions and went on an audition, and we went to Europe for 6 months, and it turned out to be 8 years. So going from country to country, I was able to see all those different fabrics, and every time I would look at a fabric, I would think about my grandmother's quilts. They quilt from a different perspective. They quilt is more than just something to keep you warm. It's something that has to be beautiful on your bed, and in that beauty, it could just be some squares. Again, squares or triangles, but by the way they use the color, by the way they get out of their way to make this piece and listen to this part of you that says, you shouldn't put that over there, put it over here. And from that point, also in the theater, you just have to learn to listen. For quilting, that was my biggest lesson, was learning how to listen to fabric, to design, and also learning how to listen to the children. I had a workshop, and it was supposed to be, like I said, black and white, and they made color out of black and white. So how do you do this? Because the child has no rules or set rules that we give them, and they will make it. Of course, it was black and white, but when you saw it, the design was so wonderful that, yeah, this could be green, it could be yellow, it could be green. And to have them to explain what they are doing, it's like, well, let me sit down, because the PhD student is telling me about my design and about her colors. So I stopped between them and my grandfather. My grandfather, who had no education, but you couldn't cheat him out of a dime, and he managed to buy 130-something acres of land in South Carolina, which is still there, and divided amongst his children. To children who might not have the vocabulary or the intellect or the education of art as far as colors and putting colors together, designs together, but they get it. They get it because they listen to that ancient old voice within that says, it's okay, you can do this. So I end with that, with my children and seniors, to say that we can all quilt, we can all do it and have fun. And most of the time, when we get together in Charleston and we say we're going to have a quilting bee and we quilt, it is never about the design. The quilt just brings us together like the food, when you have a big meal. It's never about the meal. It's about what you're going to talk about. So when I get with my kids and we say we're going to have this, and by the time you finish listening to them, you realize it's maybe a class on, they just want to vent or they just want to talk about something. If it's an older group of kids, then the stitches get tighter as they discuss whatever it is that they're talking about. So quilting serves many, 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 many things. It could just be something to keep you warm. It could be something for a group of people to get together. Or it could just be something in your solitude that you center yourself and you find peace at 4 o'clock in the morning, like I quilt, and I have to get up at 6. So it is just a wonderful thing to do, and I hope you all enjoy the exhibit. And that's it. Any questions? No questions? Yes. Uh-huh.
And I was really admiring the tenderness in your sister's eyes. And I wondered if you painted those details?
No, if you get batik, if you make a design on freezer paper, which allows you to cut out, let's say if you want to cut just because it's the highest point on your face. So I work with batik, and if you work with batik, you get all those different values of a color. And so if you just cut out the cheek and you move it over there, you see where you need to stop. And then you can shade your face just by using batik and freezer paper.
So you used a batik method.
Mm-hmm. Batik, not the paint, but the fabric.
Ooh,
Yeah.
Oh, I see. You chose very
Yes,
carefully the
you
fabric.
select it.
Oh my goodness, it's just such a personal, wonderful warmth that.
Thank you. And you know what I do? Instead of using steam seam tube, which could be sort of hard, Misty Fuse is wonderful. It's like a spider's web. So I put that on the back of the brown, the batik fabric, and then I just move that over that. And once I find it, if I cut out the cheek over here and I move it over the fabric, you're going to see what that is. And then you just take that piece of fabric, that piece of freezer paper that you cut out, and you put it over there, iron it down. And it's like painting by numbers. You just put that in that spot. Yes, and you build your faces like that.
Thank you. It's wonderfully successful.
Thank you. Yes, I think my sister would be glad to hear that. Any other questions? Yes?
Do you ever use photography or any other references, or is this all from like your memory?
Well, sometimes both. If I draw the figure, then I have it there. I will take a picture if I want to really make it look like the person and I'm unsure of how it's going to come out. Working in profile is so much easier than working full face, you know. So if I work in profile, I can sort of wing it. I would just draw the figure, but you section off the face like if you had to make a puzzle out of it. So the darkest part, the lightest part, the medium part, and once you section that off and you just make 1, 2, then you cut it all out with freezer paper. You already have the Misty Fuse underneath your fabric, and you move it over the Misty Fuse and you see exactly where it belongs. You iron it down and cut it out and just stick it on that part. It's like painting with numbers, that's all you do. It's really easy. Any other questions?
Are you finished with this one?
I wouldn't touch it, they would kill me if I did. You know how students are. If you move a string, they know it. They are. They're like little detectives. They can cut, oh, you moved my shoe. I didn't, it fell off. You know. Yes, they do. Because, yeah, but, you know, not really in theory, but yes, it represented them. That was many years ago. That's very old. And you could move just one thing that you would think no one can see, and they will come to you, move this. You know, so they don't miss anything. So, anything else? Well, this has been a joy to talk to you, and I see so many familiar faces here. I love Nebraska. Every time I come here, I just feel like I'm home, and I guess of Ruth Campbell over here and her daughters. And I always feel at home. And I think it's because growing up in South Carolina, it wasn't a prairie, but it was a farm situation. And you're talking about 1940, you know, 1939, in the 30, yeah, 1940. So it was, like I said, it was prairie time. And it was either so hot or it was just so cold. So that was good. Thank you so much for being such a wonderful audience.
Yeah, I'm going to do something really fast. So we put a couple of slides on here, so if you could just take the arrow and
Okay.
tell us a little bit about these.
African Skies and Southern Soil, that's the name of this piece. I feel that my grandfather was the umbrella of our family. My grandmother taught him how to read. When they got married, he could not read, but you could not cheat him out of a penny. He managed to buy 130-something acres of land, but he always had someone go with him to Columbia, which is the capital of South Carolina, to help with the papers. So over time, he purchased all of this land. He had 8 girls and 2 boys. So because the girls married into people with land, it just became a massive amount of land, which is still there, and no one is doing anything about it. So, meaning they're not farming, they're just living on it, because now people are into Facebook and everything else. So the younger people have the computers and the older people, like my sister in their 90s, they just sit and look at TV, which is fine too. That's my grandmother, the one that you see there, and Mildred, my sister, who still lives in, not too far from the farm. That's Mildred. And my grandmother, this is Wisdom and Proverbs. So my grandmother always had something to say about either the family or just in life in general. And that, you know, is my grandfather with his running horses. That's my grandmother calling us in from the field, which she would blow into this cow's horn to tell us that dinner was ready, which was at 12, between 12 and 1. We ate the biggest meal. My grandparents, they really didn't walk in the woods together, but they would walk around the farm and to see what was going on. So this is Old Bill and Annie Tyler, because they were just the best grandparents that we could possibly have. And this is Storm in the Hall, about the night we had to sit in the hallway, as we did many times when it rained and poured. And I think I mentioned this night, the lightning struck the chicken coop. And that was an interesting night. And I am there, you can't see two of my hands covering my ears. This is an interesting thing they did. This is called the flower pit. And around September or October, they would dig a pit. It was almost like a grave, but you can stand in it to about here for an adult. They would dig this pit, and all the flowers on the porch, they would put on a bench in this pit. And then they would cover the pit up with boards and twigs and leaves, burlap. And they would stay like that from the fall until early spring. And early spring in South Carolina is quite warm. But they would come in the middle of the winter and they would look at the flowers, and the flowers would have bloomed over the winter, which is unbelievable. So I was doing some research on that, and it's something that other farmers did too. I don't know if it was the same state, but they did it. This is called fishing on Edisto Island, and this is another folk way of fishing, and this is what my uncle told me, my grandmother's youngest child. He would go fishing on Edisto Island, and Edisto Island is about 2 hours outside of Charleston, which is one of the islands off the coast of Charleston, South Carolina. And he didn't fish with a worm and hook, but he had green walnuts that he crushed up, and he threw them out in the water, and the fish would come up and eat them and get dizzy and sort of float like that. And he would just stoop down and he would pick them up. And I often thought, isn't it toxic to eat that? But it wasn't. And I did some research, and the American Indians also fished that way. So green walnuts and fishing on Edisto Island. So we moved to New York. My mother did, before we did, she left us with our grandparents, and we moved to New York from South Carolina in the mid of, let's say, 48. But my mother went up before, and she got this house, this apartment, in a section of Brooklyn called Williamsburg. Williamsburg was full of immigrants because it was during World War II, and Williamsburg was full of immigrants there. So we moved from the South, there was just one culture, into a place where you had all these different cultures, all these different languages, all these different cuisines. I thought I had died and gone to heaven again. It was just absolutely wonderful. And in Williamsburg, she learned how to make the filter fish and learned how to make matzo balls. So pretty soon we were having matzo balls and collard greens, you know. She mixed everything together. So, but she still missed South Carolina. So I would catch her looking out of the window, and you can't tell it, but in the flowers are the faces of her mother and her sisters and the people she left down in the country. Well, fortunately for us, and we didn't think so at that time, every summer we were on the train coming south, or going south, and we would stay there for the whole summer, and we would go back and start education again in Brooklyn. That had all the cultures from all over. So we had all of this history simply by living in two different worlds, which it was good for us. We didn't know it at that time, but it was good. Her death was very difficult for me to deal with because it was like one day she was there and the next day she was gone. And so I did this memorial quilt to her called The Homegoing of Rosalie Hartwell. And it was late in life that we found out, there were three of us, she had three girls, and we were all 7 years apart. But late in life we found out that she had miscarried, and we often wondered why she never told us about that, and I think that's a very personal and tragic thing for a woman, and you just don't, you want to forget it rather than tell your children about it or tell anyone about it. So this is the homegoing, and I use, one of the hearts are made out of butterflies because butterflies go through a metamorphosis, which is almost like our life, young, old, dying, you know. So, and then she had 4 children, but we didn't know about it until late in life. So the 4th child is facing another way and the other 3 are going up. Another heart is made out of clocks because she was always saying, what time is it? What time is it? What time is it? So this is called Ode, the Homegoing, or Ode to Rosalie Hartwell. My 3 nieces were 3 tomboys, and they loved to stay in jeans and sneakers and t-shirts. But this particular Easter, my sister was determined to put them in dresses, and I guess you can see that they were not happy at all. So they were sitting there, and each one in their own world. So I thought I would capture that to show that, yes, little children do have their own way of thinking and their own little world that they live in. So it's a penny for your thoughts. My grandmother and her granddaughter's granddaughter. And I put Kimberly, that's the granddaughter's granddaughter, outside because she's from another era. She's from another time. And she's talking to my grandmother. And I wanted to know what the conversation was about, but I couldn't. I didn't want to intrude upon them. The passing of knowledge, the passing of information, the passing of time from one generation to a couple of generations to follow. So that's wisdom and child, because my grandmother was full of wisdom, and a lot of the wisdom was in a switch. So, which Kimberly never got a chance to see. Ode to Philip Simmons, the great iron gate maker, the blacksmith in Charleston. I went to his studio, so he's in the Smithsonian. He has gates all over Charleston, South Carolina, the most magnificent gates. And I went to his studio, and I was standing in his garage, and we were waiting for the studio. We were in it. You would never believe that all this incredible work came out of such a humble person. It was like a garage that you would maybe see in a yard someplace. It was incredible. He did have everything there for him to make his ironworks, but he was so humble about these gates that he made that are now in the Smithsonian all over the world. So ode to Philip Simmons. This young man was a good friend of mine. He wrote Young, Gifted, and Black. He co-wrote it with Nina Simone, Young, Gifted, and Black. And I don't think he believed in what he wrote, or I don't know if he was very unhappy because he committed suicide, which was a shock to all of us. But you never know what people are going through with you just don't know. You can't get inside somebody's mind. But he was very gifted. So I thought I would do this jam in an ode to Weldon Irving. Maya Angelou. I know why the caged birds sing. So this was a difficult piece to do because I wanted to make it very simple. And what I tried, I hope it's simple, that you can just see that just by having that cage around that young lady means that there is something that is there that she wants to talk about or to write about. So I tried to make it as simple as possible. The great playwright, poet. It was hard to find hair for her I wanted to make it in black and white, her part. And so I was trying to find this hair, and it takes me a long time when I am creating to find the fabric that I want to use because I cannot start until I have the proper fabric. And you have the proper fabric because it calls to you. It's not that you select it. You are walking down one of the rows in the fabric store, and all of a sudden you hear, "Psst," and you turn around and you go to it and you pick it up because it's been waiting for you. That's how I feel. I mean, that might sound crazy, but really, quilters will say, I couldn't start this because I was waiting for this particular piece. So it took me a long time to do this. I had to wait to find fabric that would look like her hair. In Charleston, you have all these magnificent sweetgrass basket makers, an old art form that came over from Africa, and they make the most intricate basket weaving and things like that. And I tried to take one of those classes, and I had straw all over the floor around my, and they just look at me, okay, you can come back, but I never went back. But this is what that is. That's an ode to all of them. Harriet Powers. In the 90s, I first learned of Harriet Powers, and I lived in New York City at that time, and I wanted to find out more about her. And so I got a call that she had family living in Springfield, Massachusetts. So I called them up, and it was at a time when you could go up to a place and say, I'm a quilter and I want to research your family. And I went up there and I met her great-great-great-granddaughter. But the thing was, this woman's great-great-niece looked exactly like Harriet Powers. I could hardly sit and talk to them, but I did meet her, and then we decided, I'm one of the founding members of the Women of Color Quilters Network, so we decided that we would find her grave and put a tombstone on it, which just happened last year. We were able to go to Athens, Georgia, and put a tombstone on it because it had fallen off, and we did that. But I was fortunate enough to meet some of her family and to know them as people, but they didn't feel I felt the way the quilters felt, the quilt world felt, because sometimes people don't know about their own history, don't know how important the people are to a particular, division of people. But yes, I did that, and I'm just glad I did it, and it's, I think I've made 3 of them. One is in the Smithsonian, and this one is in the McKissick. So that is it. No, quilts of conscience. I was in Cuba and walking down the street being very careful because they just monitor you and you don't know you're being monitored. You have to sign out of the hotel, you sign back in. And one night there was a big downpour and the hotel was right on the water, and we couldn't get to our hotel. And my girlfriend with me, she, being from New York, is very outspoken. So anyway, she got us to get on top of a fire engine that took us to the hotel. But the following day, I saw this little boy, and he looked so alone because you have this beautiful beach there, and people go in the beach. But for some reason, there's a loud quietness in Cuba, if that makes any sense. It's just, you can hear the silence is very loud. And so that's what I heard. And when I looked at this little boy, I imagined him in New York City or any city where you must make decisions, where children are young, and they need to make decisions on the spot what they're going to do if they see a group of boys coming to them. So they listen to the whispers of their mother, hopefully, or their fathers, or in their hearts they hear. Don't speak to them, just smile and let them go by. No matter what they say, don't say anything. So that's what I imagined. This little boy was going to sit there, and he wasn't going to listen to any of the whispers of the boys that were coming with the hoods on. And so that's called Do You Know Me? That he's saying, do you know me? You really don't know me. So that's what that is called, and I did it like that. And he is in color, and I think I wanted to do that because I wanted to show his passion to say, I am going to sit here, and I am not going to talk to them, and I am not even going to look at them. Excuse me. So that's Do You Know Me? Oops, did I do something? Oh. There was a project called the Quilted Conscience here in Lincoln. Thank you to the museum for supporting us. We worked with students who were here to learn from Sudan. And I went as a teacher, and always I learned something. And so this is about that period. And on the far right-hand side, It's supposed to be them marching, because this one student told me she walked her and her family walked a country and a half all the way up to Egypt to be able to leave there. And then they came here, and of course they ended up in Nebraska. So I did that. On the far right, your far right, you see the people marching up and across under the mountains, and underneath that quilting hoop would have been Egypt, where they came, where they went to be able to come here to this country. And in the hoop is the state of Nebraska, where they ended up. And so I was working with her, we were teaching her quilting along with Ruth Campbell was also a part of that program. And that's called the quilt Africa on the Prairie, which is dedicated to the quilted conscience. I was in South Africa, and across the street, we were in such a nice hotel, but it was built across the street from one of the I don't even know what I would call it, from one of the slum areas, but they were gated. They could not come out of the area where they were. And this little girl was so hungry, she was just dazed, and you could see that her stomach was swollen. And I thought I didn't want to invade her space, her condition, but I simply could not take a picture of her and do it, because child hunger is all over the world, and it's just no joke, because children suffer for whatever reason. So this is called Baby Hope, because someone did give her a piece of bread. It was her mother. She had one of those flat pieces of bread, but she had 4 children. The mother was part of an orphanage that was there, and this one piece of bread had to feed about 8 or 9 children. So they just sectioned it off, and she ate it, but she was standing there like, this is not going to work. So I think all women could relate to a hungry child, whether they have children or not. So that's that period of being in Africa. This is Children of the Exodus, and this is a very sensitive piece now. It was sensitive now, back then, but now it's even more so about the children who are coming over the border. And there is you can't see it really, there's a web, a spider's web on top with all of the reasons and to go and reasons to stay. And a lot of the children they just let them go, because if the parents can't take them, they will say, pay for someone to take them over. Well, you don't know if they reach their destination or not. Ironically, this is not a new piece, so it's going on today still. So that's them. And one child, because I work with children with disabilities, I had to put a child in there, because that's sort of like a disability with society, not getting anything political, but it's the children who always suffer. So that's what that is called, the children's exodus, because it's like an exodus for them. The marketplace. This is made with the Children with Special Needs High School. And I found that if you're making a piece and it's about food or about gathering, that they really get involved with it, because they see themselves as part of that group. In Charleston, we have the marketplace, which is downtown Charleston. If you ever get a chance to come, it's like stepping into another world. Charleston is based upon the culture of Barbados. It's like two places meeting together. So in the marketplace, this is the way it used to look before they decided to make it into a beautiful air-conditioned place. When you went there then, you felt like you were in Barbados, or you were on the islands and you were shopping for food. But now when you go there, you could be in Saks Fifth Avenue for all you know. It's air-conditioned and glassed in. So, but at the marketplace, people get to know each other, whether they know each other or not. They learn about their children, about their grandchildren, about their hopes, their dreams, all over food. It's like if you sit down at a table, before you know it, you're talking, and food becomes a medium to bring people together to talk. That is why the dinners, Thanksgiving, Christmas, are so great, because you get a chance to talk to everybody and find out about the grandbabies, the great-grands, and how the school is going and what on. And since grandmothers can do no harm, grandmothers are usually clustered around and everything. So that's the marketplace in Charleston, which is, like I said, now it's a different place. And this is my students' march again with the students that I work with. And I won't see any of them. This happened before COVID. So COVID sort of stopped the world. And Monique Davis. I like to show this to grade school kids because she was 13 at the time. She pitched a no-hitter for Little League. She did a shutout. And I tell them, if you stay focused, really, really focused, you can hit a home run in education. And I tell them all the things that they can do. Can you see? I tell them all the things that you can do. So I like to show this, and since it's about sports, they get motivated. They may not completely understand what I'm saying, but they eventually do. So this is Monique Davis. She's now in college. She won a scholarship because the scouts who were looking for students to give out scholarships for had heard about her, that she pitched this 70-mile-an-hour ball, and they came to see her, and she pitched a shutout. And she won a scholarship, which was a good thing. She has graduated now, I'm sure, from high school and college and everything. Thank you for going on my journey. So, any questions? Yes.
I am curious as to how you go about.
Sorry?
I am curious as to how you acquire the fabric. You seem to have a black assortment.
Unfortunately, for my bank account, it's like every time I see a piece, I never met a piece of fabric I didn't like. Because when it's true, you can look at it. I will get my design and I will say, okay, I find out what the action of what it is I'm going to do. So if it's an action piece, I want a quiet action, and then I just start looking for fabric that's going to be my voice, because that's truly your voice. You've heard people say, I was so mad, I saw red. Well, that's a very passionate thing. Or I was mellow blue, mellow yellow, or blue is the month of Sundays. So fabric has its own voice, and I find that if I use those fabrics, I also need fabric that has music, that has movement. So then it will do something for my piece. I don't know, that might work for me, but not someone else. So it takes a long time to gather fabric, maybe about 2 months or 3 months, because I can't start until the fabric says it's okay. And I think that happens with a lot of quilters. It's just they don't realize that the fabric is saying, you're not ready yet. I don't want to be next to this color. I need polka dots over here. I need stripes. Yes, anything else? Well, you have been a delightful audience. And to the ones that I know and don't know, I feel like you're all family in the threads. So thank you so much for listening, for coming.